Do you ever wonder what full sun, shade, part shade, and what all of those sun exposure terms actually mean? Not sure where to start? Well, today's podcast is going to break it down for you so you can be a successful garden center shopper this season. Welcome to the Garden Gamble, where we're planting hope, taking chances, and growing memories for every season. I'm Ricky Clausen, owner of Clausen's Greenhouse in northern Minnesota. This podcast is for anyone who's ever stood in the garden, greenhouse, or backyard wondering if they're doing it right. Here we talk real-life gardening, the wins, the mistakes, and everything we learn along the way. Whether you're new to plants or have dirt permanently under your nails, you're in the right place. Let's take the gamble and grow together. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Garden Gamble podcast, and I am thrilled. We are officially open for the season here at Clausen's Greenhouse, and we are entering peak gardening season. So this is just a very exciting time. So happy to be seeing customers again, getting to answer their questions. And I hope that you never feel bad about asking questions if you are at a greenhouse or a garden center, because I really do enjoy hearing what people want to learn about and helping them through different problems they may have with gardening. And so that's another reason too why I wanted to start this podcast, is because I do hear a lot of those questions and concerns that people have about gardening. And I just want to help them out and help you guys out, and we can learn from each other's mistakes and just be better gardeners all around. So it's been really wonderful to have customers here at the greenhouse again and to see our new setup and our new buildings. It's been really fun seeing people's reactions when they walk into the new space and just really be able to take it all in. Because even if they were here for the pumpkin patch or the Christmas village, it looks so different now that it's full of plants instead of pumpkins and Christmas lights. So that's been really a joy to see their expressions when they walk into the new greenhouse for the first time this year. And like I said, I do get a lot of questions here at the greenhouse when customers are shopping, and one of the most frequently asked questions that I get is about sun exposure. So sun exposure, it's such a simple thing, but it can be kind of overwhelming when you get into it, because every plant label is different. It's laid out a little bit different. The terminology on there may be slightly different, and there's just numerous different descriptions for sun exposure found on those plant labels, and so it can be kind of confusing. And some plant labels won't even say what it is. It's just going to be a picture of a sun or a sun with a little cloud over it. And yeah, it is a question that I get asked a lot, so I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk about it here on the podcast today. So let's break it down on what full sun, part shade, and shade actually mean. So full sun does not mean sun all day long, morning to night. That's not what that means, and I feel like a lot of customers get confused about that, a lot of gardeners, because it does not mean that you have to have sun exposure all day long. Full sun means 6+ hours of sunlight. So if you've got 6 hours, that's considered full sun. So it's a full bright area, and there's going to be many, many plants that thrive here in those full sun spots. But not all full sun plants are created equal, and this is where sometimes it can get a little confusing, because some plants labeled full sun are still going to want a break from that afternoon heat, while others can tolerate it much better. So if you're reading that plant label, and if you've been listening to the podcast now for a while, you've probably heard me say it lots of times, but you gotta read the labels. When you get to the garden center or greenhouse, each of those containers is gonna have a little plant stake, a little label in there that's gonna tell you about that plant. And it is so important to read it, because like this one, it might say full sun, but it's not, like I said, not all plants are created equal in full sun. And what that means is just some full sun plants are going to want a break from that afternoon heat, while some others can tolerate it much better. So if it's labeled on that little label, drought tolerant or heat tolerant, there's a good chance that it's going to do well in those hot afternoon, intense heat areas, especially plants that are like silvery, like Dusty Miller. Geraniums do pretty well here in the north in that full sun afternoon heat. But there are some other plants that would prefer to have the less intense sun. They still want that sun exposure for 6+ hours, so it is still considered full sun, but they want that morning sun preferably, where it's not quite as hot, or that late evening, afternoon sun, where the heat of the day, it's not as intense. So full sun is 6+ hours, doesn't have to be literally all day long. So the next one that you might see is part sun or part shade. These two terms can kind of be used interchangeably, part sun or part shade. This is 4 to 6 hours of sunlight per day. And part sun and part shade, sometimes there can be little discrepancies between the two. Sometimes if it says part sun, it means that it can tolerate a hotter exposure of sun, where that part shade, it would prefer more cooler areas like that morning sun. I'm going to use Bacopa as an example here. Bacopa does say sun to part shade on it, but I've found that Bacopa does best on the east side of a house, or that eastern sun, that morning sun exposure, because it's not quite as hot as an afternoon sun, and it's not going to dry out as fast, because Bacopa, when it dries out, it's going to drop all of those beautiful blooms, and it takes a really long time for it to recover. So Bacopa is going to do well in that morning sun. So reading that plant label, and honestly, it's a lot of trial and error, where you might just have to experiment with some plants sometimes and maybe move them to different areas of your yard and just kind of test it out, see which ones are going to do well in your area. So part sun or part shade mostly just means 4 to 6 hours of sunlight per day. All right, the next one is shade or full shade, and that means around 3 hours or less of sunlight per day. Sometimes you'll see on the tag some want like a filtered light. I see that a lot on some ivies and ferns, where they prefer filtered light. Full shade is considered 3 or less hours, and there are some plants that are going to do well in the shade. I feel like people are a little hesitant about shade gardening, where they think that plants just aren't going to thrive there. And there are a lot that can do well in those shadier areas in your yard, like ferns, impatiens, and some coleus. Coleus is a little bit tricky, because with new varieties that are coming out, there are coleus that can go all across the board. There are coleus that do well in the full sun, there's some that do well in the full shade, and anywhere in between. So coleus, if you love it, it's great, because you can find varieties that'll work in any part of your yard, but you do really have to read that label to make sure that you're putting the right ones in the right place for its sunlight requirements. So make sure, again, that you're reading that plant label. That full shade most of the time too is going to be like on the north side of your house, maybe under trees. There's a number of different ones, but most of the time when I'm talking with customers, they're talking about the north side of their house. That's where they're looking to put some plants. So I mostly talk about annuals, but there are some perennials that do really well in the shady areas too, like hostas, astilbe, and there's a number of other great ones also. So if you've got a shady spot, don't be afraid to try out a few things. ask your greenhouse or garden center to kind of point you in the right direction. Here at our greenhouse, we have little cards. They're about postcard size that say shade on them. We've got a couple that say heat tolerant on them, just to kind of help guide you in the right direction on what's going to work well in those areas. So like I said at the beginning of this episode too, like under the full sun, not all full sun is created equal, but if you find some that are drought or heat tolerant, you know that they're probably going to do pretty well in that hot afternoon sun. So that's why we put out those, ours are orange, but those orange like little cards that say heat tolerant on them, so you can kind of know, hey, I know this one is going to do well in that afternoon sun. So that's what we do. I know a lot of other greenhouses and garden centers do something kind of similar, or put plants in different areas throughout the greenhouse and kind of group them into shade, sun, and different areas that way. So, and if you're not sure, like I said, just ask. We like answering questions. So one thing to kind of keep in mind too when we're talking about sunlight is sunlight changes throughout the year. So it's really important to get a good measurement as close to gardening season as you can, if not even the year before. So if you know midsummer the year before that you're struggling with something in your yard, take a good measurement of the sunlight then. So then when that next year rolls around, you know exactly what kind of sun it's getting in that midsummer. So you want to get a good measurement in the peak gardening time or right before you plant. And it doesn't have to be anything crazy. You can just go out there hourly throughout the day or whenever you can and just kind of make a note of the sun exposure that it's getting. Lots of times it's going to be pretty similar from house to house. Like the north side's going to be shady and whatnot, but there are different elements in each yard, like different outbuildings, the way your house is placed and whatnot. So you kind of have to know your yard and just get a good measurement on that sun exposure. And one other thing is that you might find that some plants will do great and thrive in the early spring, and then they get to that midsummer heat and they're not doing so great. They're kind of struggling through the summer, but then they take off again when the sun exposure lessens and the temps cool off again in the fall. So if you have a few plants that are struggling through that midsummer heat, don't give up on them. They might just kind of make a comeback in the fall as the temps cool off, which I think is kind of fun to hear about. So when you come to the Greenhouse and Garden Center, make sure you are reading the tag. And I hope that this little breakdown of what sun exposure actually means can help you a little bit more for this gardening season. And just a quick little recap. So full sun is 6+ hours of sunlight. Part sun or part shade is roughly 4 to 6 hours of sunlight. And that full shade is about 3 hours or less of sunlight per day. So I really hope that this helps, and I hope that you guys are all getting a chance to get out to your local greenhouse or garden center for the first time this season. I know here at Clausen's Greenhouse, we're usually open now from May 1st to about the end of June. So we're just gonna ride this high, and it's a very busy time for us. But like I said, we very much enjoy it, and I love getting to help customers throughout the day with their different gardening things. If you ever struggle with something specific with gardening and you want me to kind of address it here on the podcast, I would love to know. So if you have a specific topic that you want me to cover here on the podcast, or maybe you want me to do a quick video for YouTube or social media, I do really want to know, because I want to be able to answer those questions. And there's a good chance that if you're wondering about it, somebody else is too. So we can talk about it and learn together, grow together. That's the whole point of this Garden Gamble podcast, to help try to take that gamble out of gardening. Thank you so much for listening today. And if you're out and about in the greenhouses and garden centers, have fun planting, enjoy it, take in the views, and just let that color and that sunshine lift your spirits. And we will see you next week on the Garden Gamble podcast. Take care. Thanks for joining me on The Garden Gamble. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with a fellow plant lover. Gardening isn't a gamble when you have the right guidance, and you don't have to figure it out alone. Until next time, take care.